Welcome. This is Game Jams, how to succeed in your first or 100th jam. We are all experienced game jammers here to help guide you through your game jam journey, whether you're just getting started or you've done this a zillion times. Still see some people filtering in, but we'll go ahead and get started with some intros here. First of all, I want to clarify that this is a panel about video games, so tabletop people, you can go back to your other building over there. I'm just kidding. There are a lot of awesome tabletop game jams and also jams for art or films or music, but what we're really experienced in is video game jams, so that's what we are going to talk about today. And so throughout this presentation, you'll see examples of games and artwork that were created in game jams. This example, Surgeon Simulator, the prototype for it was created in a game jam. So that's kind of a common workflow for people. They create a prototype in a weekend and then go on to create a more developed game. So throughout this presentation, we'll show you two levels of tips. In the yellow is beginner mode. If you've never jammed before, or maybe you don't know how to code or make art or music or anything, there's tips for you there. And then if you've done this before, we've got veteran mode in the pink. Those are for people who've done multiple jams, maybe want to challenge themselves, try new things, get better, meet new people, etc. So who here has done a game jam before?
Yeah, hell yeah.
That's so many people. Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. Who has done more than 3 jams? Okay, we got a lot of pros in here, so the heat is on, guys. Well, let me introduce our panel really quick. I'll go first. My name is Ruthie Edwards. I live in New York City. I am a UX designer by day, and also I teach design at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. I tallied up my game jam count, and I hit 40 last year. So for me, it all started 10 years ago was my first global game jam, and I'm just a serial game jam addict. It's kind of a problem.
I'm Valentina Haas. I'm a 3D artist and indie game developer. I've been working in games for about 7 years. I've done 15 game jams. I'm the chair for RVA Game Jams. We're a homegrown indie game collective in Richmond, Virginia. If you want to get into games, if you've never been into games, come talk to me. If you're like, I would love to make a video game, I'm all about it. I'll tell you exactly how to do it. I love it so much.
Hi, I'm Michael Savage Benoit. I'm a game designer who's done 11 game jams. Quantity isn't everything. And I'm here replacing Momin from last year. So Momin did the panel last year. Give it up for Momin.
Yeah, give it up for Momin.
Coming in late. A little bit.
It's introduction still.
Yeah. Cool. So let's start with an explanation of what is a game jam. So all the people that raised your hands, you can maybe think about something else for 60 seconds while I do this part. A game jam is an event where you make a video game from scratch. So you're making all of the assets yourself or with a team. Often it has a theme, not always, but usually it has a theme. And usually it has a time constraint. Some of the more frequent ones are 48 hours or 72 hours, but there's also week-long jams, month-long jams. However long you want it to be, that can be how long a jam is. But I would say the majority of the ones that we do are 48 hours, so basically a weekend. So why is game jamming so important to us, and why could it be so valuable to you? I think the most important thing is to make new friends. I have so many friends here who I've gotten to jam with before, and that's absolutely the best part of it. Game jamming really changed my life. I was just telling them, when I came in 10 years ago, I was like working in a job that I hated, and I saw that there was a game jam on Twitter, and I said, well, I'll go, I'll observe, I won't participate. And then when I got there, it was amazing, and they said, you can make a game? I said, I don't know how to make a game, and then they let me do it anyway. And I met so many wonderful people through that, and that is why I'm here. So making new friends, learning new things, learning new skills that are applicable in the real world or not, that's also cool. Being able to finish something, that's a huge thing. If you're in any creative field, finishing a project is really hard. But in a game jam, you don't have a choice. You have to finish the game within the time limit. Improving your soft skills. So even if you're on a team and you're just doing the project management or the file management and these kind of things, all those collaboration skills come in such handy in elsewhere in life. And also because it's super fun. So I have some more tips for you. So for our beginners, we really recommend doing game jams as the fastest way to kickstart your experience doing game development. There's a very low barrier to entry. Whatever you make doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to look pretty. You just have to get it done in the time frame. So that is a nice way to put a little bit of pressure on yourself, but also not feel pressured to create like beautiful AAA game or anything like that. For our veterans, this is an awesome opportunity to start building prototypes for full games. And you might build, like I've made 40 games. None of them are great, but they might be able to go to the next stage of developing that prototype, polishing it a little further. Challenging yourself to learn a new language, a new piece of software, a new engine, a new art style, a new music genre, all of these things. It's an awesome opportunity for that. And it's a way to coach newcomers. As you get more experienced as game jammers, you can start to bring newbies onto your team and really teaching people and meeting new collaborators. It also lets you build out a portfolio really fast. So to be able to say, I've made 30 games or whatever, or I've made 5 games even, is extremely impressive, I think. So it's a very fast way to generate a body of work. So let's get into some tips. We'll start with preparing for a game jam. So the majority of the time, a game jam, like I said, it might be a 48-hour one or have some sort of time restraint, and you are not allowed to start ahead of time. But setting up certain things is not considered cheating. I can go over some of those. You can set yourself up for success by doing things like installing your software. A lot of people wait until the jam begins, and then like Unity's servers are crashing because everyone's downloading it during Global Game Jam. So installing all of your dependencies, installing your IDEs, all your editors, updating them, all of these things. You can also set up your file organization or your version control software ahead of time. So setting up something like Dropbox if you're working with artists, that's often easier than trying to get them on GitHub, or setting up GitHub for version control for yourself if you're a developer. You can also set up communication channels. If you're doing that in real life, you can figure out ways to message each other, Discord channel, things like that, really popular. And then start to set some goals for yourself and maybe think about, what's a new piece of software you want to use, those type of goals. So you're not allowed to kind of create any assets for the game ahead of time, but these are some things you can start doing before the jam.
Yeah, this is definitely not cheating to start early on this kind of thing.
All right, so ideation and theme. You don't want to rush the process and just try and get right in there. You have a time constraint, but you're not going to use every single hour of that time jamming. So it's important to marinate on it a little bit. So here's an example of a finished product that looks pretty cool. This is from the film Knives Out. And so that's, this fully realized image, but it started from this, which is pretty much what all of our game jams look like. I have... but it expresses that same idea. So you can see like both of these two images, whoops, not that one. Both of these two images are expressing the same thing. So as long as you can really distill your idea to something really, really simple and work from there, that's kind of all that you need. Right. So We have a game jam here that I did with Tyler's probably in the audience. This is a bird butt battle royale we did for Ludum Dare. And you can see our finished product in the next slide. Listen, this is like a stupid purple bird butt, I get it, but like Vinny Vinesauce played this game on YouTube, so it's kind of a big deal. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Like you can see our little idea crystallized really, really early on, and we kind of kept that from beginning to end. So as long as you have like a simple concept and you can execute on it, that's really what's important. It's not all the bells and whistles. So you take your time coming up with your concept. You can sketch as many ideas as you can and then choose your best one. You want to marinate on it a little bit, maybe ideate for a while and then go eat some food with your friends and then come back and think about it. You don't need to really just get going right away. And if the jam starts in the evening, it's a Friday through Sunday evening jam, just marinate on it, work on it, and don't even start opening the engine and making anything happen until Saturday morning. Sleep on it a little bit. So like Celeste was created in a 4-day jam, and that's not a very long time. So they definitely weren't spending all of that time just, piling in assets and making this final realized product. They distilled their idea to something really simple, and then from there they were able to build Celeste out. So how do you know if an idea is good? For beginners, you should just aim for something that makes you excited to create and stay motivated. That's the most important part, is that you're excited about what you're making and you can just keep yourself happy working on it. If you're a veteran and you've made lots of little concepts and you're maybe looking for something that's gonna last a little bit longer, aim for something that's surprising and original, because if you've done 40 game jams, you already know once you get the theme, you're gonna play 30 games that are like really, really similar. So try to challenge yourself to find things that are gonna be a little bit different. And throw away your first 10 ideas. I think this was a tip from Momin last year. Just don't even bother with them, because every other person who has done 30 game jams is gonna come up with those same 10 things based on that prompt.
Oh boy, scoping your idea. So this is where you face the consequences of all the bad ideas you came up with in the earlier step. So when you're ideating, one of the main things that you're really gonna have to figure out is what can your team do in the actual amount of time that you're going to work. And especially if you've never done a jam before, this is just a complete crapshoot. That's what your scope should be. Aim so small. You can always make it better. But when you go too high, you're going to just fall over. And if you make something very, very small, you can always improve it with the extra time you have at the end. So try to boil down your idea to the exact parts that make you excited about it. And I think this is what's so important about ideating with your friends for a bit. Not just jumping into the jam right away. Talk with people for a bit about what really is the coolest part of the idea, and make sure that's what you're gonna do all weekend. So don't scope that. Scope that. Or just Mario, something like that, right? Like no blocks at all, just Mario jumping around and go from there. So it's important to scope around your team. So you're probably going to have different kinds of teams as you do different jams. If you're working solo, this is probably easiest to just scope around what you're able to do. But if you're working with an artist, you might want to find out some way to keep them busy the whole weekend. How many of you are audio people? Okay, I'm curious about this for a later step, but I'm at MAGFest, so I was wondering. So yeah. If you're just getting started, try to make sure that you're doing things that everyone's confident in and work from there. If you've done a lot of jams, it's probably best to try and work out some new skills that you want to work on. And otherwise, if you're going to work with like a whole team of musicians, it's probably got to be an audio game, right? Duh. Okay. So try to use it as a learning opportunity, challenge yourself. And just try to, if you're a beginner, stick to what you're confident in right now. So something that I like to do in my jams is allocate a certain amount of time to work on a beginning and an end. And I think as long as you have some like bit that is just kind of you going the extra mile, or at least it looks like that, it's going to come across as a really complete game. So one way is to add like a high score chart, or some sort of like progress tracking thing. For me, I like to make games that are sort of story-based, so I add like a huge credit sequence. And that usually involves me scoping 5 to 6 hours from the end of the jam to just be done and do a credit sequence, because I want players to feel rewarded when the game is over. So this is very, it cut out for a second. Okay, so this is just purely based on anecdotal evidence. In fact, I'm kind of curious about what you guys had to say about this. But I've just noticed scope pitfalls that people fall for, where they don't know this is a huge scope thing, but then it turns out to be. And one thing is, I'm going to tell a big story. It's just going to be a long story. It's going to have all these story beats. And then they realize, oh, I can't just like write it out in text. I have to show the characters doing this stuff. And then they get blocked, and they're scared of not finishing the story. It's this whole thing that you fall apart in. I think that making sure that you're keeping track of the bottlenecks in your team is really important. So if you have like only one artist, make sure you're not asking them to do a whole week's worth of art. What else was it? Yeah, if you're going to try new tech, like a new programming language, you got to account for that. One of the scariest jams I ever did for Ludum Dare, we learned Ink. It's like a narrative writing system. And it turned out the whole weekend was just me troubleshooting Ink. And it was just like, my dreams were just like full of like ink nightmares and stuff like that. And it was just panic attacks the whole way through. Scope is honestly more about self-care than whether you're going to be finished or not. Don't try to hurt yourself with the game jam.
Yeah, so you can always define your MVP or your minimum viable product. So for the Mario game, it might just be a block that can jump, and then some platforms, and a beginning and end. So define that as your MVP, and then if you have time, you can add things like the coins and the enemies and things like that. But really find that one mechanic and focus on that. Because, yeah, I've also had jams go awry when people want to incorporate huge amounts of stories, all these different levels, and I try to tell them, hey, we probably don't have time for this, but honestly, a lot of people just have to learn that lesson for themselves the hard way, and you will probably too, and that's okay. So if you are new to jamming, you might be thinking, okay, where do I get started? How do I even make a game? What do I start with? And you'll be starting with a game engine, which is a piece of software that lets you develop a game. And in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. Just kind of pick one and go for it. If you don't like it, that's fine, because 2 days later you never have to use it again. But I hear what you're saying. You're thinking, okay, but tell me what engine to use. I want to know. So I have some ideas for you. So I went through on itch.io, which is a popular site for people like us to upload games onto. You can actually sort by the most popular engines, so I just pulled a bunch of those. These are all really popular engines for game jams. Many of them are free or free trial or initially free, however you want to refer to these. And then we put stars next to some of the ones that are beginner friendly. We also have at the end of this deck, there's a QR code that you can get the Google Slides, so don't worry about taking photos of everything. We'll give you the deck at the end. But yeah, some fun ones in here. I would say right now Unity and Godot are the top two that most people jam in, just because they are free to get started, and Godot especially is free and open source and very accessible on every platform. But some of these other ones are fun too. I recently tried RenPy at a jam. It's for making visual narrative games, and it's very low code. You're kind of telling it if this, then that, and that's about it. There's not a whole lot of code to it. So again, very approachable and fun to work with. But also consider some of the weirder options if you've maybe you're intimidated by some of these engines, or you're on like a Chromebook and you can't download anything. There's some cool options here. If you know how to make Google form conditionals, you know how to program. If you know how to do, if the person answers this survey question, then send them to this section. You are programming. That's conditional logic. So don't dismiss platforms like PowerPoint even that let you link slide to slide together. You can make a game in that. I did a jam in Roblox just to try it out. Did not like it, but I'm glad I did it. It does have a good strength, which it has an amazing asset store. It has, hundreds of thousands of objects that people have created that are free to use. So that was very approachable. NeoCities is another one I got to try in a jam this year. It's like a replacement for GeoCities. So if you know HTML, you can make simple web pages and games in the browser without having to download anything. There's some other ones on here. Making chat bots is really fun too, or social media bots if you know how to do that. And then there's more specialized software like Game Boy Studio that kind of have a retro feel to them. I put your own engine on here. I kind of don't like that recommendation. Using your own engine is, or trying to make one in a weekend is extremely hard. I wouldn't do it, but it's available.
All right, so creating art is really fun for game jams. I think it's great because you can just get weird with it. So I have a few examples here of some jam games on itch.io. These were all Ludum Dare games. So these were all 48-hour jams. Maybe a couple of them were 72 hours, but you can see that there's like a really rich range of games with really rich vibes. Like they're all very, very different, but they use the limitations in ways that are really interesting. So you can see, this Empty by Dusty Room game has a lot of really simple silhouettes, maybe things that they already created before the jam, I don't know. But they took those things in that negative space created by the room and made something that was like really striking and really readable with really flat colors. So there's no lighting, there's nothing to generate, there's nothing to bake. You can just go straight in and really understand everything that's happening. There's Driving Home by Kleingeld. This game rules. It's really short. It just kind of captures the energy of playing the Game Boy in the backseat of the car while you're on a road trip. It has really lo-fi art, and it seems really silly, and you're just like doing kickflips on your little Game Boy, but something about this really like lo-fi MS Paint, super simple palette is very evocative, and it's something that probably wouldn't have been created without the limitations of a jam. And it really stuck with me, even though it was really simple. But I think that's what's so great about making art for a game jam is it really thinks like, how do I get in the backseat of a car? How do I get the animation of, how do I communicate this really simple idea and this energy into something so small and so short in 48 hours or 24 hours or whatever. There's Chess Bunk. I don't know. Gumboot Studio is always making these really great games. This is a little chess game, a little PvP chess game, where they went a lot more detailed with their 3D models and everything, but they went kind of, how much quantity can I make in a short period of time? I'm an experienced 3D artist who works in games for a living. So that's a way you can be like, how do I challenge myself to create this full environment and this full kind of art direction in a short period of time? Lafatin here is a procedurally generated game. So every time you load it up, you hit a button, it generates this little landscape with a little generated color palette, and then you can take pictures of it, and you can make a GIF and render it directly to Twitter. So that's something that fits like a very specific niche. It's really eye-catching. If you're interested in generative art, that's a really good way of exploring it in a really short-form way that might build, bigger for a bigger project later. And then you can also just be like, how much more detailed art can I make with a limited color palette? So Nothing to Say is a narrative game where they actually have, talk sprites and narrative and everything. But they try to, capture backgrounds and things like that with very limited time and very limited visuals. But it still creates, an environment that you can see and understand.
That's good to know. Your game jam game doesn't have to be a game. You can scope even smaller if you want to.
Yeah. So creating art for beginners, I would say if it's your first jam, start as simple as possible. And like I was saying before, how few details can you have on the screen and still communicate your core idea to the people who are playing your game? to people who don't know you and are not part of the jam. If you're just going to upload this game to itch, what's the minimum amount of stuff that you can put on that screen that they understand what it's about? And you should probably use familiar tools. If you like Photoshop or drawing, just stick with it. Be open to learning new ones if it makes it easier for your team, but stick to familiar stuff if you're trying to get things done. And lean on your strengths. If you're a creature artist and you like making critters like me, just lean on that. If you like making anime girls, make some anime girls. Don't try to make it too crazy. Ask your team what they need from you, what format you need things in, and just keep it moving. Don't spend hours like noodling and making little details and perfecting everything. Just get that basic idea across. And if you're like, oh, I'm a programmer, I really can't do art at all. These are all games that Momin put on here that Momin made, who was a programmer. Just use basic shapes with colors. Use particle effects and really simple shaders. It's the same thing, just do the basic, most minimum version so that people can understand what's happening on your screen. And if you're a veteran, do something different. Try some mouse-drawn vector art. Try to really dig into shaders and how you can make some more complex visuals on your own. Learn meshes and generating meshes through code. Just challenge yourself.
Yeah, I'll add my number one tip there is to not use the default palette that's given to you in any app. So I think Momin did a nice job taking, primary colors and then modifying them in some way that they're more pastel or they're more saturated, but don't use that default palette, otherwise you get what we call programmer art that looks very default, right, and basic.
But the bad guys are red.
That's so true. So some more things for creating art as a veteran jammer. You should use those limits to inspire and challenge yourself. So try pixel art, try super limited color palettes, low poly modeling, emulate specific eras of game art. PSX stuff is like really popular right now. Try different art styles, maybe taking, Japanese art, whatever, art from different time periods, try and convert that to 3D, try and convert that to pixel art. If you're a minimalist, try maximalism. If you're a maximalist, try minimalism. And if you're on a big team, like at a university or something like that, hosting a big jam site, you can act as an art director with beginner artists and maybe try to lead them a little bit. It's a good way to kind of be on a big team and kind of try that dynamic of managing other people and kind of helping them get their stuff in. If you're, if you already work in games and you're trying to, become more managerial or something like that. You can also document your process to share with others, which is really fun to do during a game jam. If you're on Twitter, or if you're on Blue Sky or whatever, you can start a little thread, just be like, hey, 48 hours, I have this little snippet that anybody who's looking at my portfolio can see, here's my mindset in a really bite-sized way when I'm creating. So here's an example of a jam game that I did with my friend Evie for Ludum Dare. This was a 48-hour jam. And we worked in a smart way where we could work siloed off from each other. So the programmer gray boxed everything that functioned on their own device. And then I just worked on the art on my own device. And then we were able to just merge everything really, really quickly later. And so this is a 3D game, and I modeled, rigged, and animated a whole bunch of characters for it. But there was no lighting. Everything is flat. The texture is just what you see here, these colors. So I never had to worry about shading or anything complicated or UV mapping or anything like that. It's 3 characters, it's 3 plant assets, and 3 tiles, basically. So there's a super limited amount of art, but I tried to challenge myself to make it feel like something a little bit bigger and fuller. So I leaned on my strengths. And I think that's what it takes to kind of be successful,
But do our games really need audio? Okay. There are a lot of Ludum Dare submissions that I've played that have had no sound whatsoever, and there's this eeriness that kind of sets in after a while where there's just no personality whatsoever. So don't neglect audio. In fact, I'm sure that if you just swing a cat around, you'll find an audio person who really wants to work on a game. It's called MAGFest. So if you're doing your own audio, I would recommend SFXR. There was BFXR at one point, but it just lets you make quick chiptune audio. I also would recommend just recording audio from your phone. If you have Audacity, you can probably do a little bit of trimming, and it will probably work for a game. I think it's really like it's 50-50 between how you made the audio, but also how you use it in the game. As long as like you find the right ways to use the sounds, it doesn't really matter too much. You can just create a new personality with the sounds that you have. One of the game jams I did, in fact, the first one I ever did, I had all these little villagers, and I just recorded like wah into the microphone, and I just had them go wah 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 wah, and it was delightful. Everyone loved it. Everyone loved it. So if you're a veteran, yeah, I would get into using like different effects, and I'd say even like DAWs. They're really not that hard to learn if you just spend some time on them. I'd learn them maybe ahead of the jam, but maybe if you want to focus on audio for a jam, why not learn a DAW like Reaper, or I don't know. There's like 100 of them. I'm sure someone here probably knows like all of them right now. Yeah, same thing right here for making your own music. DAWs and trackers, try a new instrument. Some people record their own music. But I would say like if that's something that you want to work into your weekend, or you know someone who wants to do that, like debuting a song for a jam is just like awesome. It's like everyone will love it as soon as they hear like really good music in a jam. It's just the most hype thing ever.
So on to building and compiling. Now that you have your game programmed and you have some art and you have some audio, it's time to build the game. But wait, you waited till the last hour and it's not compiling. Classic game jam story.
Godot 4 has web problems. Be very careful.
Yes. So our advice is to not wait until that last hour to build your game. Sounds obvious, but we've all been there. So set a goal to compile a limited working version, that maybe your MVP version, about halfway through the jam, just to make sure that it's building, that it works in a web browser. Like we were saying, Godot has some issues with some web browser stuff. Unity does too. I mean, they all do. Just to make sure your game compiles and builds. I think that's the best tip we have, but you probably will still wait to the last second to compile.
No, I'm being totally serious. Use Godot 3.5 if you want to go on web.
Yeah.
I need to tell you.
User testing. This is another thing that most people put off to the very end, but it can be really valuable. So if you're doing an in-person jam, like we usually do, Global Game Jam in person in Richmond, there's a lot of in-person meetups for Global Game Jam and things like that. That is an awesome way to just walk around and play other people's games. But if you are, say, working remotely, or you're doing a jam that's people from all over the world, it helps to maybe post a link to your game in the Discord channel or whatever, and get some people to play it and get their feedback from it. User testing is nice to have. It's not totally crucial. Obviously, you can just make a game and submit it, but it'll be a lot better if you can get some user feedback. So have people play the game, have them tell you what felt unbalanced, what felt repetitive or not fun, and then improve those things using the last day of the jam or so. And then finally, hosting or submitting. So for jams like Global Game Jam, they have their own site where you submit the game as a zip file or an exe file, and people can play and download it. But for other jams, you have to find hosting and put a link on the website. So how the heck do you do that? The best advice is that most people prefer to play games in their browser because they're lazy. If you just post a link to an exe file, the amount of plays you'll get on that is like way lower than if it just plays automatically in the web browser. That's especially true for Ludum Dare, which is one of the most popular worldwide jams. People will see that your link is downloadable and they go, I'll play one that's easier to play. So try to find ways to embed your game into the browser, like HTML5. And make the page itself look nice. That's my cheat. This is a game I made called This Little Piggy. This is the itch.io page. You can customize things like the header, the backgrounds, the fonts, the colors of the buttons, and make that page look nice. And that's sort of a cheat code. People will think your game is better than it is. But that's not all. That's not the end of our tips. We have some more things, tactical tips. So how do you actually go to a jam? And how do you find one? How do you take care of your mind and body as you go through one of these things?
All right, so self-care is really important. Jam site is, especially in person, can really fray your nerves if you're not sleeping enough and you really want your game to be good. So it's important to be good to yourself and to the people around you. So practicing self-care, it's important to drink water and take breaks and eat a vegetable maybe. You can eat a lot of pizza, but like one vegetable might be good for you. And then like go to sleep. People are like, no, I'm so good at video games and I'm gonna stay up for 48 hours and make the best video game ever. You won't because you're gonna be so sleepy. So just go to sleep. It'll be really great for everybody if you're not mad, at the rest of your team because you're grumpy because you haven't slept at all. It's really important to be good to all the people that you're working with. Crunching is not good for you. It's really easy to do it, especially when you're really excited, but you're gonna make worse work when you don't sleep and you don't give yourself time to just breathe, so just go to sleep. And so finding jams, there are so many jams now, it's insane. If you go on itch.io, there is this just absolutely insane nexus of jams happening all the time for every type of genre, for every type of engine at every time frame you could possibly want. But for in-person jams, Global Game Jam is one of the largest jams, and a lot of colleges and a lot of institutions will host jam sites, and that's maybe the biggest physical jam you can find. College campuses host a lot. Local game developers groups like RVA Game Jams or Swamp Goblin will do it. And the International Game Developers Association. Look up all these places if you're trying to find a physical place to connect with other people who want to do game jams in person. But online jams, like I said, you can find anything you want. So this is just from last year. This was like 1 month or something insane like that. There's just so many things you can do. Literally just go on this website and be like, what kind of game jam do I want to do and when do I want to do it? It's easy to add it to your schedule. There's no excuse. So, jam examples like Global Game Jam is a really good exploratory one. It's a great first jam. There's one theme, it's 48 hours, and you can just join a big team. It's the easiest, lowest barrier to entry, I would say.
And it's next weekend.
Yes.
And if you're in the RVA area and you're interested, we have a physical jam site at VCU. So Game by Its Cover Jam, we have a bunch of folks at RVA Game Jams to do this every year, but the premise is people make a fake game cartridge for a game that does not exist, and then those get put in a gallery show at a gallery in Japan. I think Ruthie knows more about this than I do, but later they do a game jam where people have to make those games that are based off of those cartridges, and they have a really long time to do it, and it's awesome. And that's a much more longer, relaxed, you can do it remotely kind of game jam. There's the Haunted PS1 demo disc. If you're into that, spooky PSX YouTube nonsense, this is perfect. It's awesome. They take a whole bunch of really strange little games that are all in that PSX aesthetic. People are really, really passionate about it, and they release it all as this digital downloadable demo disc. It's very creepypasta. It's all that. It's a lot of fun. And then there's Ludum Dare, which is a completely community-based jam. So everybody votes on the theme, and they vote on, which themes that they like out of all the user-submitted themes, and then they do that in multiple passes until they choose something. A lot of streamers will play Ludum Dare games because they're short, and there's a lot of really high-quality games in this jam. And then people also vote on categories, like art or humor or music or whatever. So you get ranked by the community if you also rank 20 other games. So everybody who is voting has to be, invested, and that's really fun in a low-stakes kind of way where there isn't a judge board telling you this game is good or bad. It's just other people who participated in the jam. So that's a whole lot of fun. They do 3 of those a year.
I'll add 3 more jams to that list. In New York City at Wonderville, there's a 2-hour game jam club that meets on Saturdays. That is really fun because you get to start a brand new engine. There's like a 1-hour workshop where we learn something new, and then a 2-hour jam. Like very little time commitment, and you come away with a game and having learned something new, which is awesome. But if you have absolutely no time, you're thinking, oh, when am I gonna, have time to make a game? I have good news. There is a 0-hour game jam that takes 0 hours to complete. And you're asking, how do I do that? The hour on daylight savings time, when it changes from 2 a.m. to it's like it ticks over to 3 a.m. and then it goes back to 2 a.m. There is a jam for that, and it is really fun. We did it at Denny's because it was like the only place open. But very challenging to make a game in 0 hours. But then you can say you did it. Another one I liked that has been around for a few years now is Secret Santa Jam. So you get a person assigned to you, and you make a game for them in secret. So that's fun to kind of, I guess, dox them a little bit and find out what they like, and then make a game for them. So there's lots of fun premises, and we're so excited to share all of those with you. Like I said, we have the QR code. If you scan this, you can get to the Google Slides, so you can revisit any of those recommendations. These are our social media handles. I'm still on Twitter. But we have...
It is called Twitter.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Whatever it is, yeah. We have about 15 minutes for questions if anyone has anything they'd like to ask. Okay, black t-shirt.
Firstly, if you have a computer and want bad sound, dog shit microphone on YouTube is grateful for that. Secondly, if you have made your own game engine, is that something you're allowed to use? Was that dog shit microphone?
Okay, so the question was, dog shit microphone is an easy way to make sound. This is cool, I like that. And that wasn't a question, but the second question was, if you've made your own engine, can you use that in a jam? Absolutely. So a lot of these jams require you to make your game open source. So if you're comfortable with that, you can do that. Global Game Jam and Ludum Dare require you to upload all of your source code. So if you're comfortable uploading that and maybe potentially revealing your engine to other people, I would say go for it. Michael. What are the best practices for forming a team?
I don't know. I guess like you probably want to have a diverse set of skills. But I don't know. I think as long as you cater the game idea to your team, that's kind of more important. So you could have 4 programmers. As long as you make a game that 4 programmers could make, then you're probably good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's more about the expectation, setting that at the beginning and understanding the limits of your team and just working around that instead of the other way around where you have this idea and you don't have the art to back it up or the programming to back it up.
It's probably good to not pair tons of high egos together. That's probably all I'll say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We did a fun thing one year. If you're organizing a jam, I really liked the way this worked, where we had everyone fill out a little piece of paper that says, I do code, art, audio, I am beginner, veteran, etc. And then we made teams for everybody. So that's one way to do it. So we tried to balance the teams where you had one veteran and then a bunch of newbies, and it was balanced between programmers and art. In Richmond, we have way more artists than programmers, just because VCU is a big art school and all of that. But elsewhere, it might be like all these developers and only one artist. So finding ways to balance the teams.
If you're one of these like Maryland programmers, just go to Richmond. Go to Richmond and do the game jams there. They need programmers.
Blue shirt in the back.
When it comes to user feedback, is there a specific type of user feedback you should be looking for? I feel like critical feedback might be really deflating, where on the flip side, if you get really, if you send it to your friends, and they're just like, oh, I want to support your talent, and they don't give you real feedback, and they just want you to feel good about your own work, there's like a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, great question. We'll just repeat the question because if it's being recorded, I don't know if we're being
Yeah, it was
recorded.
what kind
actually.
of what kind of user feedback to ask for,
Yeah.
and you don't want to deflate your own feelings about working. I'd say that. So I have a lot of trouble receiving feedback sometimes, and one thing that I like to focus on is just moment to moment. What are you enjoying? What are you not enjoying? You don't want to get into these very long discussions where they become armchair developer telling you to change everything about your game. You probably want to start deciphering what you could or could not do to help with their enjoyment of the game. And sometimes it's just not the right person for your game. Like sometimes you're not making the game for that person, and you just have to accept it as a data point. But yeah, I would just try to get like positive, negative, in the sections that you want to deal with.
Yeah,
Not just the whole game overall. Was it bad or good?
Yeah. Put specificity into your questions. Don't ask, did you like it? Because that invites a lot of criticism. But instead say, did the character's jump movement feel right? Or was it too long? Or what? Add some specificity to your questions, and then you won't invite criticism so much.
Your friends will be much happier saying they didn't like level 5 than that they didn't like the game overall.
Right in the middle here.
So when it comes to game jams, whose responsibility for production? As in looking at the overall production pipeline of a jam from beginning to end on the team?
Interesting question. So it's who is in charge of production and making sure the game gets done from beginning to end?
Usually no one.
Yeah, no one. No, it depends on your team. So if it's a solo jam, it's all on you, right? But if it's a group jam, it could be, you could do it more democratically. You could have one person be designated as the project manager. I think that's a very strong way to work. Someone who manages the submission page and makes sure that we're completing all the tasks, maybe making like a simple Trello board or things like that. We usually don't have one person just dedicated to production, just because we need more art, more programming, more music. But if you can have one person on the team dedicated to that, I think that does help a lot.
Yeah, I would say that this is the biggest skill I learned through game jamming was like learning when to say no and to give people like, I can do this, but I can't do all of this, and compromising. Because if you have everybody excited about, your premise of your game, but the art team is like, I can't fill out this entire 3D FPS map in the 8 hours we have left in this jam, and we have to build it and everything else, they might say, hey, we can pare it down to this, and that's all I can do. So it's more about understanding your limits, and the programmer might say, hey, you made so much art, and there's no way I'm going to get it all in. Or a musician may not be able to make, title screen music and end screen music and credits music and 3 different level, themes or whatever. So it's kind of about self-editing if you're not on a gigantic team that can have the luxury of somebody who's just going to be your producer.
The life hack I learned from Jake here was to just say, oh, that's a great idea. It's priority 2.
Yeah.
Priority 3, right? Like it goes down the priority list, which it starts to mean that it's never going to happen. But
Yeah.
you're still adding it to the list, so it's really nice of you.
Yeah, there's a lot of frameworks like must have, nice to have, like to have,
Yeah.
that help you prioritize stuff. So there's a lot of frameworks and tools out there to help you with that. Striped shirt.
So, for a complete beginner, do you think familiarizing yourself with the engine first before the jam starts is wise? Or do you think
Yep.
like a trial by fire sort of system is good to really get how the engine's gonna work for you?
Depends on what kind of person you are, but I think we're all thinking no.
Yeah, so the question is, if you're a complete beginner, is it a good idea to get acquainted with your game engine ahead of time or do trial by fire during the jam and just wing it?
I don't know. I'm gonna get acquainted with it at least a little bit first. Otherwise, if you're not somebody who adopts new software and stuff quickly, you might spend a lot of time having friction just with your software, and then that's precious hours of you YouTubing how to make something happen that's really simple. Especially if you're learning new art or a new programming language or some completely new paradigm that's new to you. So I would say yes, there's a lot of really good tutorials online for like, learn Bitsy in 2 hours or whatever, some kind of game engine that gets you really started on the basic logic of things. So if you're the kind of person who gets anxiety, I would say try and prepare a little bit before you start your jam.
Yeah, do you think it depends on your personality?
Some people are just trial by fire people,
Yeah,
and
it's
like
so true.
they're like, I'll never do it if I don't put a ton of pressure on myself today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. So I came to this panel last year, and at that point I'd only done 2 game jams, and they were both Ludum Dare. And by y'all's recommendation, I went to my global game jam, and I did that, and it was a lot of fun. But I had a lot of like almost shock when I found out that it was only 48 hours, and then I was used because Ludum Dare is 72, at least the format that I do, and so 48 was like, God, I have like no time. I guess my question for you all is there a jam where the framework behind the jam like really severely impacted or like had a strong impact on the product you ended up making?
Yeah, tell us about 2-hour jam.
Oh, the 2-hour
1 hour
the-
jam,
the-
0 hour
the
jam. That's-
0 hour jam.
Oh, by the way,
yeah.
the question was, was there a jam that we had done where the framework or the time span or how we were supposed to do the jam really impacted the game we made?
Yeah, for 0 hour jam, which is truthfully 1 hour jam, but we, fudge it a little bit. It's 0 hours. Yeah, that's one where the time constraint absolutely puts a huge limit on what you can do. So I did have to plan ahead of time what engine I was going to use and then what I was going to create the art in, and also have them open on my computer before the jam started because I could not waste a single minute. So I scribbled some art in like Microsoft Paint or something as fast as I could. But yeah, the time constraint is hard. 48 hours is a short amount of time. But that's why we keep saying over and over, keep your ideas simple, keep your ideas small. Yes, it will force you to constraints. If you're like me, you wait till the very last couple of hours to do audio, and then you go, oh, I don't know how to do audio, and then you record some stuff on your phone, and you're very limited by that. That happens to me way too often. I should really learn more audio. But yeah, you're kind of constrained by what you already know often. So that's another constraint.
The shortest I ever did was a 24-hour jam for IGDA locally here, and yeah, I think I did it was like a Tamagotchi kind of game where these like little monsters would run around this 3D planet, and I was really proud of the 3D planet. And then after I published it, I realized that the way they pathed around the planet was completely busted. So after playing for like 10 minutes, they'd all be at the North Pole, just like stacked on top of each other. These are just the things that fall through the cracks when you don't have time.
Yeah, my first jam, it was called Menagerie, our game, and you kind of embody different animals in order to escape the zoo. But the scope of that was way too big, and our programmer was trying to tell us that, but I didn't know any better. But at the end of it, you transform into the elephant and you can escape the zoo. But for some reason, the elephant shot up into the sky. And we just left that in there because it was amazing. It was so funny. It would like twirl around like this. Yes. And but we ended up, making that part of the game that the credits would fall down with the elephant when it finally decided to return back to the surface. And so, yeah, adapting to what you have. It's not a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. That's a classic.
Ludum Dare originally was only 48 hours, and if you meet any of the Ludum Dare old heads and tell them how good your game did, they'll tell you, well, you had 24 hours extra to work on it. Mark.
Hey, so because of my current job, there might be a strange possible future where I might be becoming in charge of hosting jams myself. And because of the specific nature of this job, I'm trying to use my influence in this company to possibly introduce the idea of having either money or computers as prizes or something for participating in the jam that I would ideally want to have on tiers that descend, but I don't
So the question was about whether introducing prizes basically to a game jam can really alter the purity of the jam.
I think there's ways to handle this that make it fun and fair for everyone, because you might have veterans who are making awesome games, you might have newbie teams who are making like the crappiest little games, and you want it to feel fun for everyone. One jam I did at NYU gave prizes for different categories like best audio, best narrative, and that felt more fair. And the prizes were like board games and pretty low stakes things. Of course, for Global Game Jam, there's no prizes globally. Local sites might have prizes, but that kind of keeps it it has that kind of more open source vibe to it. But on Ludum Dare, if you win, you get a little like 8-pixel icon next to your name, and that is a huge deal. It doesn't cost anything except for the server costs of that 8-pixel GIF or whatever it is. But it's like, it feels like such a nice accomplishment when you get it's just a little gold circle or something. But that's just like using status as an award rather than bringing prizes or money into it. That could be another fun way.
I think it can be tough because, like, no matter what, if there's any winning component whatsoever, it's definitely a portfolio prize as well. Something that's kind of tricky about jams is, like, they're not really the most accessible thing if you're going to go so hard for a weekend. So, I don't know. I think as long as the prizes are sort of nominal things like board games and all that, then it feels a little less in your face, right? Because some people might have won if they just weren't tired.
Oh, here with the gloves.
It depends on if you can convince people that you pivoted or you didn't finish.
Yeah. So the question is, have you ever not finished a jam or had to pivot to something else?
More or less. I usually do that like last minute pivot, but pretty much every jam game I've made was meant to have all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed when I work solo, I tend to drop the ball more than when I'm working with a team. Even though, with that said, I did a game by its cover this year, and I didn't finish, and I had a teammate on that, and it felt really bad. Like, I let her down. She did all the audio, and it was awesome, and she did it on time, and I did not deliver a game, and it felt bad. But that game is always there for me to pick back up again. I don't feel bad about it right this second. But it's always there, and you can finish it later. It's not like a contest or anything, so I didn't feel obligated to. And sometimes you have life stuff that comes up, and it's okay to not finish a jam. But I got some cool screenshots out of it. Made some cool GIFs, put them on Twitter, made a little trailer, things like that. And that feels like a good end point or a stopping point. So coming to those stopping points can be valuable too, I think.
On that note, I think.
Ooh, good segue. Okay.
Nice.
Bye.
Oh,
Have a fun
yes.
night.
Bye.